Tonight, a legal case in the highly competitive world of classical music is raising new questions about equal pay. Boston Symphony Orchestra's principal flute player, Elizabeth Rowe, has been with the symphony since 2004. She was hired after a blind audition behind a curtain. She's paid nearly $70,000 less than one of her male counterparts, 63-year-old principal oboe player John Ferrillo. Boston Symphony says the wage gap doesn't have anything to do with gender and that, quote, the flute and the oboe are not comparable because, in part, the oboe is more difficult to play and there is a larger pool of flautists. Here now is Ash Gao, senior editor at the Daily Wire. Ash, good evening. Good to have you with us tonight. So where does this stand right now, and does she have an argument?
I don't believe she has an argument. I mean, this is not a case of unequal pay for equal work. I mean, these are two very different instruments. The oboe, trying to find a principal oboist is a much more difficult process than finding a prized flutist. I mean, even the Boston Symphony Orchestra pointed out that it's a much more difficult process. I mean, John Ferrillo was lured away from the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, promised to be paid twice as much as the rank and file members, while Rowe went through the blind audition process.
Are there examples where women in this orchestra are paid more than men? I mean, what other examples, sort of give us some context?
Oh, absolutely. So Ferrillo might be the highest paid principal in this orchestra, and there are 4 other principals, all men, who are paid more than Elizabeth Rowe, and there are 9 other principals, including one woman, a harpist, who's paid less than Rowe. So unless she's trying to say that all principals should be the same, or that she, if there's other instruments that should be paid equally, if she's trying to say the oboe and the flute are the same, then should the clarinet player be paid the same? Should the bassoonist? I mean, these are big questions.
Let's take a look, though. There is a look at the top earners in America's largest orchestras by gender and average salary. And according to this, men do appear to make more. $254,000 is the average. Women, $202,000. What are your takeaways from that?
Well, when the study was done, I think the Washington Post had put together one, and they found that 18% of the top earners in various symphonies are women, so only 18%. But what wasn't looked at is what instruments are making the most money. I mean, perhaps women are flocking to the same amount of same instruments, while men are taking over all of the others, so that there's a huge pool of women vying for a small number of positions versus men who are applying for multiple instruments. I mean, this might be a supply and demand situation rather than a gender situation.
So if you wanted your child to make more money, maybe you should stick an oboe in their hand instead of a flute. Is one of the lessons here. But I know that one of the reasons that you're drawn to this story, just from following what you like to write about, is the issue of gender imbalance in terms of pay. So just fill people in on why you feel that this is an issue that is not necessarily apples and apples when you look at it even in the big picture between men and women in the workplace.
Right, because there are still situations, there's still different factors that are going into why Elizabeth Rowe is paid less than John Ferrillo, and it has connotations outside of just the orchestra in the main business world. Women make choices, in this case deciding to play an instrument that a lot of other people also play, versus Ferrillo choosing to play an instrument that not as many people pay. I mean, we see that in the business world, whereas men go into more difficult, more dangerous, higher paying jobs, while women tend to do what they like, which gravitates toward jobs that don't need as much education and don't command as high a salary.
There's a lot of women screaming at the TV right now saying, what is she talking about? I know there's a guy at my job who gets paid more than I do, and it's not fair. It's not to say there isn't any disparity out there based on gender, is it?
No, absolutely not. But most of those disparities do come from factors such as hours worked, such as the jobs that you go into, such as taking time off to raise a child, or taking time out of the workforce to care for a child. I mean, these are all factors, but sometimes, yes, a man and a woman may be paid unequally, and it is unfair. But those are rare instances and very difficult to find an actual case.
And check out the French tuba or the oboe. Thank you, Ash. Good to see you.